Education. 1.1. Conceptual Introduction. Education at the Crossroads of Civilization. Education stands today at the crossroads of history. On one path lies unprecedented access to information, fueled by digital technology and artificial intelligence. On the other, a growing emptiness of meaning and a loss of ethical direction. Humanity now lives in an age where connectivity has increased, but community has weakened, where knowledge has expanded, but wisdom has declined. This paradox marks the defining crisis of modern learning, a condition in which the human mind is stimulated, but the soul remains neglected. The digital world allows us to learn everything except how to live wisely. It is this awareness that gives birth to the ecosystem transformative education (ED) paradigm, a framework that views education not as the transfer of content, but as the transformation of character. ET begins from a radical premise that learning is a living process, dynamic, ethical, and sacred. It is not confined to classrooms or institutions, but unfolds in every human encounter with truth. Education must therefore be reimagined as an ecosystem of transformation, where every part of the process, policy, pedagogy, technology, and culture, works together to nurture becoming, not merely knowing. ET proposes a return to the ancient yet eternal purpose of education, to shape the whole human being, Insan Kamil, one whose intelligence serves compassion, whose reasoning serves conscience, and whose learning serves life itself. 1.2. Theoretical Foundation. Triadic Roots of the Transformative Model. The theoretical framework of ET arises from the intersection of three great traditions: Islamic philosophy of education, systems theory, and transformative learning theory. Together, they form the triple helix of ET, the spiritual, systemic, and reflective dimensions of transformation. The Islamic philosophy of education provides the moral and spiritual foundation. It defines education through three interconnected processes: tarbiyah, talim, and tadib. Tarbiyah nurtures growth in accordance with divine purpose, shaping the learner as part of a greater moral ecology. Talim transmits knowledge and cultivates intellectual clarity. Tadib perfects ethical refinement and moral responsibility. These three layers merge into a unified vision where learning is not the acquisition of facts, but the formation of being. The systems theory, articulated by Ludwig von Bertalanffy, contributes the ecological dimension of ET. Education, seen through this lens, is a living system, open, adaptive, and self-organizing. Transformation does not result from rigid control, but from intelligent feedback, continuous learning, and dynamic balance. ET adopts this principle to design education as a responsive organism that evolves through reflection and innovation. Finally, transformative learning theory, as developed by Jacques Mezirow, introduces the element of consciousness. It emphasizes that true learning occurs when one's worldview is challenged, re-examined, and restructured through critical reflection and dialogue. ET expands this by embedding spirituality as the highest form of reflection, tafakkur, intellectual contemplation, integrated with tazakur, spiritual remembrance. The union of these traditions forms the intellectual skeleton of ET, knowledge guided by ethics, systems driven by purpose, and transformation sustained by faith. 1.3. Philosophical Statement. The Ontology of Becoming. ET begins with an ontological conviction that education is life itself, a continuous act of becoming. Learning is not an event that happens to humans, it is the process through which humans become more fully themselves. In this sense, ET does not define education as a preparation for life, but as life in motion. Its epistemology recognizes that human intelligence is plural, as captured by the Human Index, HUX, a synthesis of 10 intelligences that form the architecture of the complete human being. Learning is not confined to logic or memory, but extends into emotion, creativity, ethics, social empathy, and spiritual insight. The axiology of ET, or its moral compass, is founded on tawazun, the balance between intellect and intuition, science and spirituality, self and society. It teaches that every educational act must be evaluated not only by its efficiency, but by its ethical impact. In this triadic philosophical structure, ontology of life, epistemology of holistic intelligence, and axiology of balance, ET finds its identity as a living philosophy of transformation. ET thus redefines the purpose of education in one elegant sentence: to form human beings who think with reason, act with conscience, and live with compassion. In this view, a university is not a factory of certificates, but a garden of souls, a place where intellect grows under the sunlight of morality and the rain of wisdom. 1.4. Historical context: the birth of a transformative paradigm. ET emerged in response to two simultaneous revolutions shaping the 21st century, the AI revolution and the OI revolution. The former transformed machines into thinkers, while the latter transformed institutions into algorithmic systems. Both increased efficiency but risked erasing humanity. Artificial intelligence, AI, has automated reasoning but cannot reproduce moral judgment. Organizational intelligence, OI, has optimized systems but often ignored meaning. The result is an educational structure that is smart but not wise, efficient but not ethical. ET responds by integrating AI, OI, and HI, human intelligence, into a balanced ecosystem where speed is guided by sincerity, automation is grounded in adab, and analytics are moderated by awareness. It seeks not to reject progress, but to reframe it, transforming technological evolution into ethical revolution. Historically, this paradigm resonates with the spirit of the Islamic Golden Age, when education unified science, faith, and art within the civilizational ethic of hikmah, wisdom. ET revives that harmony, positioning education once again as the axis of civilization, not merely its instrument. 1.5. Scriptural inspiration: transformation as divine law. The Quran declares a profound principle of transformation. Indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves.
Quran Surat Irad Atrizeg Hainzeg.
This verse establishes transformation, tagir, as a divine law, an unchanging principle of cosmic justice. Change begins not in systems or institutions, but in the soul. It is the moral and spiritual awakening of individuals that drives the renewal of societies. ET interprets this verse as the theological foundation of transformative education. Learning, in this vision, is an act of ibadah, a sacred striving to reform the self, islah al-nafs, so that society may be reformed. Education thus becomes a bridge between the inner and outer worlds, between personal awakening and collective renewal. 1.6. Conceptual framework: layers and processes of transformation. ET defines transformation across three interrelated layers of human and institutional life. The first is the individual layer, where education cultivates ethical intelligence, self-awareness, and spiritual resilience, the renewal of the person. The second is the institutional layer, where learning organizations adopt adaptive systems, innovation feedback, and moral governance, the renewal of structure. The third is the civilizational layer, where education nurtures cultural wisdom, unity of purpose, and global harmony, the renewal of humanity. Across these layers, ET operates through four recursive processes known as the spiral of transformation: policy, PK, Tibin, TB, Agile, AG, and sustainable culture, SC. Policy sets the ethical foundation of governance, ensuring that decisions are guided by adab. Tibin represents the creative emergence of innovation, the pulse of renewal that prevents stagnation. Agile embodies the dynamic process of adaptation, allowing systems to evolve without losing values. Sustainable culture completes the cycle, embedding transformation into the collective habits and traditions of the institution. In this spiral, transformation becomes perpetual, a living organism rather than a static reform. 1.7. Application to modern education, from structure to spirit. In practical terms, ET manifests through the design of holistic learning systems. It integrates human index, HUCs, instruments to assess students not merely by cognitive ability, but by moral growth, empathy, and creativity. It weaves AI, ethics curricula into the Merdeka Belajar Campus Merdeka (MBCAM) framework, ensuring that freedom of learning is accompanied by freedom of conscience. It encourages the formation of reflective forums, spaces such as Friday discussions, spiritual circles, and ethical dialogues, where institutions engage in continuous introspection. Through initiatives like the Smart Campus Umaha, ET merges digital innovation with moral governance, building a university that is both technologically advanced and ethically grounded. In all these applications, the focus remains the same: to make education a transformative culture, not a mechanical system. 1.8. Ethical reflection, the balance between change and conscience. Transformation without ethics leads to chaos. Ethics without transformation leads to stagnation. ET stands as the bridge between these two extremes, proposing a path of reflective dynamism. It teaches that change must be guided by conscience and that progress must never outpace moral integrity. The educator, in this context, becomes a guardian of balance. Technology, policy, and curriculum are understood as tools, not ends. The true aim of all educational effort is the realization of Insan Kamil, the complete human being who embodies intellect, compassion, and purpose. 1.9. Implications for the future, education as moral compass. The 21st century will not be led by those who know the most, but by those who reflect the deepest. As knowledge expands and artificial intelligence accelerates, the danger is not ignorance, but the absence of wisdom. ET offers a vision where education becomes the moral compass of the AI age, ensuring that technological evolution is balanced by ethical evolution. Universities, within the ET framework, are not institutions of employment, but ecosystems of enlightenment. Their graduates are not mere workers of knowledge, but custodians of meaning, individuals who think critically, feel deeply, and act nobly. 1.10. Summary statement: the renewal of the human spirit. Academic Unit Number 1 concludes that education must evolve from knowledge transmission to ethical transformation. The ecosystem transformative education provides the bridge between intellect and morality, between science and soul, between learning and life. It redefines education as an act of worship, a journey of awakening, and a foundation of civilization. ET proclaims that the future of humanity depends not on how much we know, but on how deeply we transform through what we know. It is this conviction, that education is the living art of becoming more human, that ignites the movement of ET toward its next exploration, the diagnosis of the crisis of meaning in the digital age. Perfect direction, Prof. Sparkles. We will now rebuild Academic Unit Number 2, the crisis of meaning in the digital age, into a continuous, narrative exposition following the AEDRI book reference style. Rich paragraphs, no bullet points, deeply layered analysis, with clear subtopics that flow naturally like a philosophical, educational treatise.
Ecosystem Transformatif Education, ETE. Academic Unit Nomor
2. The Crisis of Meaning in the Digital Age. 2.1. Conceptual Introduction, the Paradox of Digital Enlightenment. The digital age was heralded as the dawn of human enlightenment. It promised connectivity across continents, access to limitless information, and the democratization of knowledge that previous generations could only dream of. Yet, as our screens glowed brighter, our understanding of life dimmed. Humanity now lives in an era where information has multiplied, but meaning has diminished. Education, which once guided the human spirit toward wisdom and virtue, has been reduced to a mechanistic process of data transmission and credential accumulation. This paradox defines what scholars call the crisis of meaning, a deep existential confusion in which learners know everything except why they learn. The very technologies that were designed to free the human mind from ignorance have, paradoxically, entrapped it in distraction and superficiality. Knowledge is now fragmented into endless bits, stripped from the holistic narratives that once gave it context and moral direction. The ecosystem transformative education, EE, model begins precisely at this point, not to reject technology, but to rehumanize it, to bring back depth where there is only speed, and to restore ethics where there is only efficiency. ET argues that true education is not the transfer of data, but the transformation of consciousness. 2.2. Historical trajectory of the meaning crisis. The crisis of meaning did not emerge spontaneously. It evolved through several historical epochs that gradually reshaped the purpose and nature of education. The first epoch was the Industrial Age, which converted schools into engines of uniform productivity. In this period, education was organized like a factory, structured, repetitive, and efficiency-oriented. Students were trained to fit into the machinery of production rather than to cultivate their unique potentials as moral and reflective beings. The second epoch, technological modernity, intensified the focus on speed and measurement. Education was increasingly defined by its capacity to serve industrial and economic demands, while the inner dimensions of learning, such as contemplation, empathy, and ethical reflection, were sidelined as non-essential. The third epoch, digital modernity, brought about an explosion of access to information. Yet, this abundance produced an unintended consequence: fragmentation. Truth became algorithmic, filtered through the logic of likes, shares, and trends. The digital learner could access all knowledge instantly, but lacked the patience to dwell in reflection. Finally, the age of artificial intelligence has pushed this trajectory to its extreme. Machines now think, write, and even teach, but without conscience or compassion. Humanity has gained intelligence without introspection. In this context, ET arises as a corrective system, advocating that technology must return to its proper role as a servant of wisdom, not its master. 2.3.
Philosophical diagnosis. Knowledge without wisdom.
At the heart of the crisis lies a fundamental philosophical dislocation, the separation between ilm, knowledge, and hikmah, wisdom. In classical Islamic thought, knowledge and wisdom are intertwined. Knowledge without moral purpose leads to chaos, while wisdom without understanding stagnates into passivity. Yet, modern education has celebrated the former and neglected the latter. The digital age measures intelligence by the ability to recall, replicate, and calculate, while neglecting the deeper human capacities to discern, empathize, and serve. Knowledge has become an accumulation of information, not an illumination of the soul. The learner has turned into a consumer, not a seeker. ET restores the sacred unity between knowledge and wisdom by grounding learning in ethical reflection. It invites both educators and learners to see that knowing is a form of becoming, and that the final aim of education is not mastery over the world, but mastery over the self. 2.4. Theoretical foundation, the collapse of meaning systems. The crisis of meaning has been extensively studied by modern thinkers, and ET integrates their insights into its transformative framework. Neil Postman's critique in Technopoly describes how modern societies surrendered their moral judgment to technological authority. Zygmunt Bauman's notion of liquid modernity portrays how all that was once solid, values, truth, and identity, has melted into flexibility and uncertainty. Ziauddin Sardar identifies our era as post-normal times, a condition marked by chaos, contradiction, and complexity where no single narrative can make sense of reality. Complementing these, Syed Muhammad Naqib al-Addaz offers a distinctly Islamic critique, asserting that the modern confusion stems from the loss of adab, the proper order of knowledge and conduct. When adab is lost, knowledge becomes disordered and society becomes disoriented. ET draws from these theories to build an epistemological remedy. Knowledge must be anchored in ethics, and technology must be governed by conscience. The true innovation of ET lies in its relinking of the moral and the mental, the spiritual and the systemic. 2.5. Scriptural grounding, divine warning against hollow knowledge. The Quran provides an unambiguous warning against the illusion of superficial knowing.
يعلمون ظاهرا من الحياة الدنيا وهم عن الآخرة هم غافلون.
They know only the outward appearance of the worldly life, but they are heedless of the hereafter.
Quran Surat
Arklum 37.
This verse is not merely theological, it is profoundly educational. It diagnoses the human tendency to mistake external mastery for inner understanding. E.T. reads this verse as a timeless epistemic mirror. The more we expand outwardly in information, the more we risk collapsing inwardly in meaning. The verse thus calls for tazakur, reflection, and tadib, ethical discipline, as the twin processes through which learning attains its spiritual and civilizational purpose. 2.6. Psychological dimensions of the crisis. The digital world has profoundly altered the human psyche. Learners today live under the constant bombardment of stimuli, leading to what psychologists describe as cognitive overload. Attention spans shrink, and the ability to sustain deep thought erodes. The result is a generation that is connected globally but fragmented internally. Emotionally, the digital age cultivates desensitization. The endless scroll of tragedies and triumphs on social media dulls the moral imagination. Empathy becomes performative, and identity becomes dependent on external validation rather than inner conviction. E.T. interprets education as a process of psychological healing. Learning, in this view, is not merely cognitive training but an act of restoring coherence between fikr, thought, dhikr, remembrance, and nazar, ethical vision. The classroom becomes a space for reflection, not just information transfer, a sanctuary for the soul, not merely a system of tests. 2.7. Sociocultural consequences, the hollowing of learning. As the crisis deepened, societies began to treat education as a commodity. Knowledge became a product to be sold, not a virtue to be cultivated. Universities competed for ranking rather than for relevance. Teachers turned into content deliverers, students into consumers of credentials. The dignity of learning, once rooted in humility and reverence, eroded under the weight of market logic. In such a world, adab, the ethical etiquette of knowledge, is forgotten. Respect for teachers fades, patience in study weakens, and the pursuit of truth is replaced by the pursuit of recognition. E.T. seeks to rebuild this ethical foundation by promoting a culture of reflection and community of sincerity. Schools, universities, and institutions are envisioned not as bureaucratic machines, but as gardens of souls where intellectual and moral growth nourish each other. 2.8. Educational reorientation, from data to meaning. The central task of ET is to redesign education so that learning once again becomes a journey of meaning. In the conventional paradigm, education is obsessed with metrics, test scores, degrees, and digital badges. The teacher is seen as a transmitter and the learner as a receptacle. Knowledge is static and success is quantified. ET proposes an entirely different vision. The purpose of education is transformation, not transmission. The teacher becomes a murabi, a nurturer of minds and hearts. The learner becomes an active co-creator of meaning. Technology is used consciously, not compulsively. Assessment is seen as an opportunity for ethical reflection, not mechanical measurement. In this reorientation, the classroom regains its sacredness. Every lesson is an ayat, sign of God, every learner is an amana, trust, and every act of teaching is an ibadah, devotion. 2.9. Civilizational reflection, between progress and purpose. The meaning crisis is not confined to individual learners, it threatens the very soul of civilization. The 21st century, with all its technological glory, has achieved an unprecedented mastery over nature, but has lost mastery over desire. Humanity builds machines that can think, but not hearts that can feel. This imbalance between progress and purpose forms the existential dilemma of our time. E.T. envisions a new civilizational direction called Tamaduntagiri, the transformative civilization. It is a civilization that advances not through domination, but through wisdom, not through acceleration, but through balance. In this vision, technology serves humanity, policy serves ethics, and innovation serves compassion. The ET civilization is one where artificial intelligence is balanced by spiritual intelligence, ensuring that human evolution remains moral, not merely mechanical. 2.10. Summary statement: the humanization of learning. The crisis of meaning in the digital age is, in essence, a crisis of consciousness. It cannot be resolved by more information or faster networks, but only by a return to reflection and ethical integration. The ecosystem transformative education framework restores this lost dimension by transforming education into an act of awakening, an invitation to rediscover what it means to be fully human in an age of machines. E.T. concludes that the purpose of education is not merely to produce thinkers, but to cultivate reflective souls. The question is no longer what do we know, but who do we become through what we know. As a principle of E.T. declares, we must not only teach students how to think, but why to think, and for whom. Transition to Academic Unit No. 3. The next section, The Anatomy of the Transformative Ecosystem, will unveil how E.T. translates its philosophy into a systemic structure, mapping the four living processes, policy, Taiban, agile, sustainable culture, that make transformation not a theory, but a continuous ecology of life. Would you like me to now continue with Academic Unit Number 3 in the same narrative paragraph style, complete with deep philosophical structure and visual conceptual model of the ET ecosystem spiral, Prof?
Herba excellent, Professor.
Now we move gracefully into Academic Unit Number 3, The Anatomy of the Transformative Ecosystem, the Structural Heart of Ecosystem Transformative Education, ET. If Unit 1 defined the imperative of transformation and Unit 2 diagnosed the crisis of meaning, then Unit 3 unveils how transformation actually happens, its anatomy, its movement, its pulse. This chapter reads like the architectural map of the living system that animates the entire ET philosophy. Blue Book Ecosystem Transformative Education, ED.
Academic Unit Nomor
3. The Anatomy of the Transformative Ecosystem. 3.1. Conceptual Introduction, Education as a Living Organism. Every ecosystem, whether natural or intellectual, survives through balance, interaction, and renewal. Education, too, is an organism alive, responsive, and self-transforming. Yet for decades, most educational systems have been structured like machines, rigid, hierarchical, and mechanical in operation. ET begins with a different assumption. It views education as a living ecology of transformation, where every element, policy, curriculum, leadership, learner, and environment functions as an interdependent organ of growth. Just as a healthy ecosystem thrives on diversity, feedback, and equilibrium, a transformative education system must thrive on ethical coherence, reflective dialogue, and adaptive innovation. ET's ecosystem is therefore not static, it breathes. It listens, adjusts, evolves, and regenerates. It learns from its own learning. In this living design, transformation is not an event but a continuous process, recursive, circular, and sacred. 3.2. Philosophical Basis, the Ecology of Knowledge and Being. The philosophy behind the transformative ecosystem rests on a holistic metaphysic. All knowledge is relational, and all being is interconnected. No learner exists in isolation, no idea stands apart from its context. Learning occurs through interaction between the self and the world, between reason and revelation, between the visible and the invisible. ET revives this ecology of knowledge, recognizing that fragmentation is the root of intellectual decay. Modern education often divides disciplines, divorces ethics from science, and separates cognition from compassion. The ecosystemic view dissolves these walls. It restores harmony between ilm, knowledge, amal, action, and isin, excellence. From this perspective, a university is not an institution but a microcosm of civilization, a reflection of divine order within human effort. The classroom becomes a field of cultivation, haql al-tarbiyah, where students and teachers co-create meaning, guided by the sunlight of revelation and the soil of reason. 3.3. The structural core, the spiral of transformation. The living structure of ET is expressed through what is known as the spiral of transformation, a four-phase dynamic process that keeps the educational ecosystem in constant motion. These phases are policy, PK, TIBIN, TB, Agile, AG, and sustainable culture, SC. Each phase does not replace the other but folds into the next, creating a continuous spiral of growth and renewal. Policy sets the moral direction, TIBIN sparks innovation, Agile ensures adaptability, sustainable culture secures continuity. Together, they form the anatomy of transformation, the nervous system of the ET organism. 3.4. Policy, PK, the ethical architecture of governance. The first organ of transformation is policy, which ET defines not merely as regulation, but as moral architecture. Policy establishes the niyya, intention, of the educational system. It determines not only what is done, but why it is done. ET insists that every educational policy must be rooted in adab al-ilm, the proper ordering of knowledge and conduct. Policies should not only respond to efficiency, but also to ethics, justice, and compassion. In the ET framework, decision-making becomes a form of taqarrub, spiritual proximity, a conscious act of stewardship over human potential. Policy, then, is not a bureaucratic device, but the ethical skeleton of transformation. It ensures that every act of teaching and innovation remains faithful to the higher purpose of life, to nurture insan kamil, the balanced, complete human being. 3.5. TIBIN, TB, the pulse of innovation. From ethical foundation flows creative expression. The second organ, TIBIN, represents the spontaneous pulse of innovation. In the Javanese, Islamic intellectual tradition, TIBIN means to emerge unexpectedly from within, symbolizing divine inspiration or sudden insight. Within the ET model, TIBIN embodies the emergence of new ideas that arise naturally when ethical structures meet reflective environments. Innovation here is not imitation of the West nor rebellion against tradition. It is the natural flowering of human creativity guided by moral roots. ET encourages institutions to build TIBIN spaces, laboratories of meaning where learners are free to explore, design, and create within the boundaries of ethical consciousness. In such spaces, innovation becomes ibadah, a creative expression of gratitude toward the Creator. 3.6. Agile, AG, the dynamic principle of adaptation. The third organ of transformation is Agile, representing flexibility, responsiveness, and learning agility. In the age of rapid technological and cultural change, static systems perish. ET teaches that true transformation requires the agility of reflection, the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn without losing ethical orientation. Agility in ET is not reckless adaptation but reflective movement. It blends the analytical mind with the contemplative heart, ensuring that every adaptation serves balance rather than chaos. Institutions under the ET model establish regular cycles of feedback, dialogue, and recalibration, allowing their policies and curricula to evolve organically while remaining faithful to moral principles. The Agile organ thus serves as the muscular system of the ecosystem, enabling movement, resilience, and renewal. 3.7. Sustainable culture, SC transformation as tradition. The final organ of the transformative ecosystem is sustainable culture, the stage where transformation becomes tradition. In this stage, the principles of ethical learning, innovation, and adaptability are no longer projects. They are habits, shared values, and living customs of the community. ET defines culture not as art or heritage alone, but as the collective rhythm of meaning, the shared consciousness that guides behavior across generations. When transformation becomes culture, education ceases to depend on individuals or leaders. It becomes self-perpetuating. This is the civilizational goal of ET, to produce institutions that do not merely teach change but embody it, where akhlaq is practiced naturally and reflection is a daily discipline. In such ecosystems, renewal flows silently like water, invisible yet life-giving. 3.8. The flow of the spiral, recursivity and renewal. ET's spiral of transformation is recursive, meaning that once the cycle of policy, Taiban, agile, sustainable culture completes, it returns to the beginning enriched by reflection. This recursivity ensures that transformation is never exhausted. Every generation renews the vision anew. This cyclical motion mirrors divine patterns found in nature, the alternation of day and night, the rhythm of seasons, the regeneration of life. Just as the heart beats endlessly to sustain the body, the ET spiral pulses continuously to sustain learning. In this view, education becomes a spiritual ecology, where renewal is both biological and metaphysical. 3.9. Practical manifestations, the ecosystem in motion. Within universities and schools that adopt ET, the ecosystem manifests through interconnected practices. Leadership operates through ethical governance, ensuring that policy reflects adab. Pedagogical innovation flows through Taiban labs and reflective communities. Institutional agility is nurtured through continuous self-assessment and open dialogue. Finally, cultural sustainability is achieved by embedding transformation into ceremonies, symbols, and rituals of learning. An example is seen in the Smart Campus Umaha initiative, which integrates digital systems with spiritual ethics, uniting artificial intelligence with moral intelligence. Through projects like these, ET demonstrates that digitalization and faith are not opposites, but complementary energies in the evolution of civilization. 3.10. Summary statement: the soul of the system. The anatomy of the transformative ecosystem reveals that education is not a structure to be managed, but a soul to be cultivated. Policy gives it bones, innovation gives it pulse, agility gives it motion, and culture gives it spirit. Together they form the living organism of ecosystem transformative education. ET transforms schools and universities into ecosystems of enlightenment, where learning is a continuous act of creation and reflection, a living dialogue between reason, ethics, and divine purpose. In essence, ET redefines education as civilization in motion, a rhythm of renewal that turns institutions into gardens, knowledge into wisdom, and learners into custodians of light. Transition to Academic Unit Number 4. We now advance to Academic Unit Number 4, the Human Index, HUX, and the Architecture of Intelligence, where ET explores the multidimensional structure of human potential as the foundation of transformative assessment and learning design. Would you like me to proceed, Prof., with Academic Unit Number 4, fully written in the same continuous narrative format, exploring the HUX model, 10 human intelligences, as the psychological and spiritual anatomy of transformation?
Herba excellent, Professor.
We now enter Academic Unit Number 4, the Human Index, HUX, and the Architecture of Intelligence. If Unit 1 introduced the transformation imperative, Unit 2 diagnosed the crisis of meaning, and Unit 3 revealed the anatomy of the transformative ecosystem, then Unit 4 descends into the microcosmic level, the human being as the living center of the ecosystem. Here we meet the HUX model, the Human Index, which stands as the psycho-spiritual architecture of ecosystem transformative education, ET. It answers the question, what is the structure of human potential that ET seeks to awaken? Blue Book Ecosystem Transformative Education, ED.
Academic Unit Nomor
4. The Human Index, HUX, and the Architecture of Intelligence. 4.1. Conceptual Introduction, Rediscovering the Human Core. Every system of education ultimately rests upon its conception of the human being. If we define the human as a worker, education becomes industrial training. If we define the human as a data processor, education becomes digital instruction. But if we define the human as a moral, spiritual, and creative being, a Khalifa of consciousness, then education becomes transformation. The Human Index, HUX, was born from this conviction. It is the ET framework's core model for understanding human potential, a multidimensional map of intelligences that integrates the cognitive, emotional, ethical, and spiritual aspects of being. Unlike conventional IQ or EQ models that isolate certain capacities, HUX envisions the human person as a symphony of 10 interrelated intelligences, each reflecting one facet of divine light within the human self, Nur Insaniya. HUX is not a measurement of ability, but a mirror of becoming. It asks not how smart are you, but how are you evolving toward wholeness. Through HUX, ET measures the pulse of transformation within learners, educators, and institutions alike. 4.2. Philosophical Foundation, From Intelligence to Consciousness. In modern psychology, intelligence has often been reduced to logical reasoning, analytical speed, or computational ability. Yet, such a reduction fragments the human soul. Classical Islamic philosophy offers a broader vision. The intellect, aql, is not merely rational but moral and spiritual, a faculty that connects human perception with divine order. ET's HUX model reclaims this holistic understanding. Intelligence is understood as awareness in motion, the movement of consciousness toward truth, beauty, and goodness. Each intelligence expresses a particular form of knowing, marifa, knowing through thought, knowing through feeling, knowing through empathy, knowing through revelation. The philosophical basis of HUX thus merges the insights of Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence, and Al-Ghazali's ilmu laduni, knowledge by illumination, weaving them into a unified anthropology of intelligence rooted in spirituality. ET teaches that the human mind is a mirror of the cosmos. Its intelligences correspond to the divine names, Asma al-Husna, reflected in creation. To educate is therefore to polish this mirror so that the human soul may reflect truth without distortion. 4.3. The Architecture of HUX, 10 Intelligences of Transformation. The Human Index, HUX, identifies 10 intelligences that form the anatomy of transformation. Each represents a dimension of being that education must cultivate in balance. The first is cognitive intelligence, the foundation of reasoning, analysis, and logic. It corresponds to the rational mind, the ability to distinguish, to infer, and to synthesize. Yet in ET, cognition is valuable only when guided by ethics. Otherwise, it becomes manipulation. The second is emotional intelligence, the capacity to recognize, regulate, and express emotions in harmony with others. It is the intelligence of empathy, the bridge between the heart and the world. The third is moral intelligence, which governs conscience. It allows one to discern right from wrong, justice from injustice, purpose from pleasure. This intelligence anchors freedom within responsibility. The fourth is spiritual intelligence, the capacity to perceive meaning beyond the visible. It connects the self to transcendence, transforming knowledge into wisdom. The fifth is social intelligence, the intelligence of relationship, the art of building trust, cooperation, and collective purpose. It is the pulse of leadership within the ecosystem. The sixth is creative intelligence, which transforms imagination into invention. It is the intelligence that births art, innovation, and problem-solving rooted in meaning. The seventh is ecological intelligence, the awareness of interdependence between all forms of life. It shapes environmental ethics and sustainable behavior, reminding learners that every act affects the balance of creation. The eighth is technological intelligence, which governs our interaction with digital and artificial systems. In ET, this intelligence is tempered by adab digital, the etiquette of technology guided by compassion and truth. The ninth is reflective intelligence, the ability to introspect, question assumptions, and learn from experience. It transforms mistakes into maturity and routine into renewal. The 10th and highest is integrative intelligence, which harmonizes all others into a coherent self, the intelligence of unity, the mirror of Insan Kamil. It is not a separate skill, but a condition of wholeness, attained through balance and humility. Together, these 10 intelligences form the living map of the human being, a tenfold architecture of consciousness that ET nurtures in every learner. 4.4. The Hux Paradigm, from measurement to meaning. Conventional education measures intelligence through performance, how fast one calculates, how well one recalls, how efficiently one executes. Hux transforms this paradigm by shifting the axis from measurement to meaning. It regards intelligence as a process of inner awakening rather than external achievement. ET's assessment instruments derived from Hux thus evaluate reflection, empathy, ethical decision-making, and creative insight alongside academic skill. The goal is to observe the learner's evolution toward balance, not merely competence. This redefinition changes the teacher's role as well. The educator is no longer a judge of scores, but a mirror of growth, guiding the student's journey through presence and example. Learning becomes an intimate dialogue between intellect and conscience, a path toward equilibrium rather than competition. 4.5.
Scriptural Resonance, Intelligence as Amanah.
The Quran describes humanity as the bearer of a sacred trust. Indeed, we offered the trust to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains, but they refused to bear it and feared it, yet man undertook to bear it.
Quran Surat Al-Ahzab 33-72.
This amana, the trust of consciousness, is the foundation of all intelligences. It is the divine potential embedded in humanity, the ability to know, choose, and act with awareness. Each of the 10 intelligences in Hux represents a facet of this trust. When one intelligence dominates or declines, the balance of amana is disturbed. ET thus interprets education as the process of fulfilling the amana of intelligence to awaken, integrate, and align every faculty of the self with divine harmony. In this sacred view, intelligence is not human possession but divine gift, and learning is the act of gratitude that actualizes it. 4.6. Psychological interpretation, balance as mental health. In psychological terms, the Hux model offers a pathway toward holistic mental health. Fragmentation of intelligence leads to anxiety, burnout, or alienation. Harmony among intelligences creates serenity and resilience. For example, when cognitive intelligence operates without emotional intelligence, the mind becomes cold and mechanical. When emotional intelligence is unbalanced by moral intelligence, sentimentality overwhelms clarity. When technological intelligence advances without spiritual intelligence, innovation turns destructive. ET proposes that well-being is equilibrium, and education is the therapy of imbalance. Hux thus functions as both diagnostic and developmental instrument, revealing which dimensions of the learner require nurturing and which have matured. It transforms the classroom into a place of healing, not competition. 4.7. Institutional application, Hux as compass of transformation. At the institutional level, Hux becomes the compass for curriculum design, teacher training, and policy formation. Universities applying the ET framework integrate the 10 intelligences into their learning outcomes, ensuring that each program develops the mind, the heart, and the conscience in harmony. Leadership development programs use Hux to evaluate ethical awareness alongside administrative skill. Research projects are guided by HUX-based rubrics that measure not only technical innovation but social and moral impact. Even community service programs are redesigned to cultivate ecological and spiritual intelligences through participatory reflection. Through these applications, ET ensures that education remains human-centered even in a digitalized world. The human index becomes the moral code of institutional DNA, the compass that keeps technology aligned with humanity. 4.8. Hux and AI, OI, HI integration, the intelligence trinity. In the broader ET framework, Hux serves as the foundation of the AI, OI, HI integration model, artificial, organizational, and human intelligence. Artificial intelligence expands capability, organizational intelligence refines coordination, human intelligence ensures conscience. Hux harmonizes this trinity by defining the ethical parameters of progress. It asks, what should machines do? What must humans never surrender? In this integration, AI serves HI, not the reverse. ET asserts that the highest intelligence is not artificial efficiency, but moral coherence, the ability to use technology without losing humanity. Thus, Hux provides the ethical spine for the AI age, transforming digital civilization into a field of moral cultivation. 4.9. Educational implication: redesigning learning through Hux. Learning under the Hux paradigm becomes a journey of awakening across 10 dimensions. Curriculum is designed as a spiral that allows learners to experience every intelligence through authentic projects, ethical dilemmas, creative expression, and reflective dialogue. For instance, a science module does not only teach physical laws, but invites reflection on the harmony of creation, spiritual intelligence, and its stewardship, ecological intelligence. A business course integrates moral and social intelligences by emphasizing justice and empathy in decision-making. A technology class cultivates technological intelligence guided by digital ethics. Assessment is dialogical. Learners write reflective journals, engage in moral debates, and design community innovations as proof of understanding. In this model, learning becomes sicker academic, remembrance through reflection. 4.10. Summary statement: the wholeness of the human. The Human Index, Hux, stands as the heart of the ET philosophy, the map of human potential that defines education as transformation of being. It reveals that intelligence is not a number, but a mirror of consciousness, not a score, but a story of awakening. Through Hux, education reclaims its sacred duty to form human beings who are balanced in thought, emotion, action, and spirit. This wholeness, the integration of the 10 intelligences into one luminous self, is the realization of Insan Kamil, the complete human. ET declares that civilization will not be transformed by machines or markets, but by humans who have remembered their divine intelligence. Transition to Academic Unit Number 5. In the next unit, we shall explore Ethics of Transformation, Adab as the soul of learning, where ET develops the moral grammar that sustains its entire ecosystem, the laws of conduct that turn knowledge into wisdom and intelligence into virtue. Would you like me to continue with Academic Unit Number 5, Prof, written in the same deep, continuous AD narrative style, focusing on adab, ethics, and the moral soul of transformation?
Herba excellent, Professor.
Now we move with reverence into Academic Unit Number 5, Ethics of Transformation, Adab as the soul of learning. If the previous unit, Hux, explored the architecture of intelligence, then this unit explores the architecture of virtue. It answers the essential question: how can transformation remain pure, stable, and sacred? The answer lies in one timeless principle, adab, the moral rhythm that sustains every pulse of the ecosystem. Transformative Education, ET. Blue Book Ecosystem Transformative Education, ED.
Academic Unit Nomor
5. Ethics of Transformation, Adab as the soul of learning. 5.1. Conceptual Introduction, when knowledge loses its soul. Knowledge without ethics is like light without warmth. It illuminates, but does not nurture. In the modern world, education has produced brilliant intellects yet failed to cultivate beautiful hearts. This imbalance has created what Syed Muhammad Naqib al-Atas calls the confusion of knowledge, the dislocation of truth from goodness. ET identifies this as the ethical fracture of the digital era. While the mind of education has evolved, its conscience has not. Learners know what to do, but not why they do it. They can solve problems, but often lack clarity about whether those solutions serve life or destroy it. Thus arises the necessity of adab, the ethical framework that rehumanizes knowledge. ET asserts that no transformation is truly transformative unless it is guided by adab. For without adab, change becomes chaos, progress becomes pride, intelligence becomes arrogance. Adab is the soul of learning, the invisible light that keeps transformation aligned with truth. 5.2. Philosophical Foundation, the Ontology of Adab. In its deepest sense, adab is more than manners or decorum. It is the proper order of being and knowing. The term derives from the Arabic root adb, meaning to invite to goodness. It implies harmony, proportion, and appropriateness, each thing placed in its rightful position. From an ontological perspective, adab represents the alignment of human consciousness with divine order. It is the balance between haq, truth, and care, goodness, between ilm, knowledge, and amal, action. In classical Islamic education, adab was not a separate subject, but the living context of all learning. It defined the relationship between student and teacher, between knowledge and character, between intellect and humility. ET restores adab to its original grandeur as the ontological foundation of transformation. In this view, education is not merely the cultivation of skill, but the discipline of the soul. Every act of learning becomes an act of self-arrangement to put the heart, the intellect, and the will in their proper places before God and humanity. 5.3. The triadic nature of adab, self, knowledge, and society. Adab in the ET framework operates through three intertwined dimensions. The first is adab toward the self, which calls for self-discipline, sincerity, and awareness of one's purpose. The second is adab toward knowledge, which governs intellectual humility and respect for truth. The third is adab toward society, which ensures that learning is directed toward service and justice. Adab toward the self cultivates tazkiyah al-nafs, purification from ego and vanity. It demands that the learner approach knowledge as a seeker, not a consumer. Adab toward knowledge restores reverence for the act of learning. It treats every book, every teacher, and every moment of discovery as sacred. Adab toward society transforms learning into responsibility, the awareness that knowledge is a trust to be shared, not a weapon to dominate. ET weaves these dimensions into one continuous practice of living ethically in thought, word, and action. The ultimate goal is to form akhlaq al-karima, noble character that becomes the fragrance of civilization. 5.4. Scriptural grounding, the prophetic ethic of knowledge. The Quran describes the relationship between knowledge and humility with exquisite clarity. And say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge.
Quran Surat.
taha 20:114.
This verse, revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, emphasizes that knowledge itself requires humility and dependence upon divine guidance. The Prophet, despite being the most knowledgeable of humanity, was commanded to continually seek more, a reminder that learning is an endless act of worship.
The Prophet also said,
The most beloved of people to Allah are those who bring the greatest benefit to others. H.R.
Ahmad.
ET reads these teachings as the ethical constitution of transformation. Knowledge must lead to humility, and humility must lead to service. When education produces servants of life, rather than masters of power, it fulfills its divine purpose. 5.5. The relationship between adab and haqs. In the architecture of ET, adab functions as the moral software of the human index, haqs. Each of the 10 intelligences finds its ethical calibration in adab. Cognitive intelligence is moderated by honesty, emotional intelligence by empathy, moral intelligence by justice, technological intelligence by restraint, and creative intelligence by sincerity. Without adab, these intelligences become unbalanced. A person may be clever but manipulative, innovative but unethical, expressive but egocentric. Adab harmonizes the Hux system, ensuring that the flowering of intellect never overshadows the fragrance of virtue. ET therefore teaches that adab is not an addition to intelligence, it is its essence. To educate the mind without educating adab is to create brilliance without light. 5.6. The pedagogy of adab, from instruction to ultism. Teaching adab cannot be achieved through instruction alone. It must be modeled, lived, and embodied. The ET pedagogy thus introduces ultism, the principle of ethical commitment. In this method, teachers are not transmitters of knowledge but exemplars of virtue. They guide through presence, patience, and prayer. Students are invited to internalize adab through reflective practice, not memorization. Every learning activity is framed by intention, niyya, and reflection, muhasabah. Classrooms become circles of sincerity, where dialogue is tempered by respect and discovery by gratitude. ET envisions rituals of learning, small but profound acts such as beginning each class with basmala, ending with reflection, or engaging in adab dialogue sessions to discuss ethical dilemmas. These rituals form the invisible curriculum, the moral rhythm of transformation. 5.7. Ethical ecology. Adab as the DNA of institutions. Just as individuals need ethics to remain whole, institutions need adab to remain just. In the ET framework, ethical ecology means that the principles of adab are woven into the DNA of governance, policy, and culture. Universities guided by ET design their policies with the awareness that procedure without morality leads to oppression. Leadership decisions are made not only for efficiency, but for maslahah, the greater good. Evaluations and promotions are tied to integrity and service, not only performance metrics. Through this ecology, adab becomes institutional character. The university is transformed from a bureaucratic machine into a moral community, a jama'a ilmiya, a gathering of hearts united in the pursuit of wisdom. 5.8. Theological reflection. Adab as light of existence. The classical scholars often described adab as nur al-wujud, the light of existence. This metaphor captures the essence of ET's vision. Adab illuminates human action from within. Without adab, knowledge becomes shadow. With adab, even the smallest act becomes radiant. The Quran praises those who combine knowledge with reverence. Indeed, only those who have knowledge among his servants truly fear Allah.
Quran Surat Fatir 35:28.
This fear, Qaf, is not terror but reverence, the deep awareness of divine presence that prevents arrogance. ET regards this verse as the epistemological peak of education. When learning leads to awe, not ego, it has fulfilled its purpose. 5.9. Civilizational implication. Adab as the architecture of harmony. No civilization can sustain itself on technology alone. The collapse of civilizations, both ancient and modern, has always begun with moral decay, the loss of respect, humility, and self-restraint. ET sees adab as the civilizational architecture of harmony, the inner grammar that holds society together. When adab guides politics, justice prevails. When adab governs science, discovery serves humanity. When adab shapes culture, art becomes beauty with truth. Adab, in short, is civilization's immune system. It protects the collective soul from the viruses of pride, corruption, and nihilism. ET thus envisions a Tamaddun Tagiri, a transformative civilization founded upon ethical literacy, where every innovation begins with intention and every policy ends with compassion. 5.10. Summary statement. Adab as the heart of ET. The ethics of transformation is the beating heart of the ecosystem transformative education. Without adab, the ecosystem loses its rhythm. Without virtue, intelligence becomes void. ET restores adab as the living soul of learning, an energy that flows through teachers, students, policies, and systems alike. It is through adab that knowledge becomes wisdom, reflection becomes reverence, and education becomes worship. In the end, The goal of ET is not to produce the most advanced institutions, but the most adab-conscious humans, those who think with humility, act with justice, and live with gratitude. ET reminds us, to transform the world, we must first refine our adab, for adab is the language through which truth speaks and the form through which wisdom lives. Transition to Academic Unit Number 6. The next chapter will unfold Digital Ethics and the Moral Compass of Artificial Intelligence, where ET explores the intersection between adab and technology, ensuring that the age of machines remains guided by the light of the human soul. Would you like me to continue with Academic Unit Number 6, Prof., written in the same deep narrative and philosophical structure, focusing on digital adab and AI ethics within the ET civilization framework?
Excellent, Profesor. Here is Academic Unit Nomor
6. Digital Ethics and the Moral Compass of Artificial Intelligence, fully elaborated in the same ADRI-style narrative structure. This unit explores how the ecosystem of transformation, ecosystem transformative education, EE, engages the era of machines, ensuring that technology remains an instrument of meaning, not the master of humanity. 6.1. Conceptual Introduction: When Machines Meet Morality. In the dawn of the digital era, technology promised liberation, acceleration, and boundless possibility. Artificial intelligence, AI, algorithmic systems, and data-driven platforms offered to streamline education, tailor learning, and expand access. Yet beneath that promise lies a profound tension. What happens when machines that process begin to replace humans who ponder? What happens when efficiency overtakes empathy, speed overrides depth, and automation displaces agency? The unit of transformation asks, how do we ensure that digitalization serves conscience rather than erodes it? ET argues that the age of artificial intelligence is not only a technological moment, but a moral battleground. The systems we build reflect not merely our capacity to innovate, but our character to serve. Therefore, this unit positions digital ethics as the moral compass of the AI age, the guiding star that keeps our educational ecosystems aligned with human dignity, spiritual purpose, and communal flourishing. 6.2.
Philosophical Foundation: Ethics Before Algorithms.
At the core of digital ethics lies the recognition that technology is never neutral. It carries embedded values, assumptions, and power relations. Philosophers and ethicists have warned against what has been called ethics washing, the use of catchy slogans about fairness, transparency, or bias, without deep structural change. In the ET framework, the philosophical foundation rests on the principle that machines must serve humanity's moral ends, not define them. The human being is conceived not as a data point to be optimized, but as a trust, a mana to be honored. Education becomes the field in which we cultivate adab digital, the etiquette of technology, in which innovation is guided by humility, reflection, and responsibility. This restores the ancient insight that knowledge, ilm, must be informed by wisdom, hikmah, and that every tool must be subordinated to virtue. 6.3. Scriptural and theological grounding: responsibility in the age of intelligence. The Quranic verse that guides transformation in Unit 1: Indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. QS. Ar-Raid 13:11 also resonates here in the digital domain. The moral architecture of ET holds that the emergence of technology demands a parallel emergence of moral agency. The use of AI in education is not simply about indexing data and personalizing learning. It is about who we become when we deploy such tools. Ethics in digital transformation become acts of worship when they derive from intention, niyya, self-reflection, tazakur, and service, khidma. When we design algorithmic systems in schools, universities, or society, we must remember that the human being is the locus of meaning, not the machine. Theological reflection thus returns. Technology must elevate the human spirit, not suppress it. 6.4. Contemporary landscape: ethical challenges in educational AI. The educational field today confronts a constellation of ethical issues as AI becomes embedded in teaching, learning, assessment, and governance. These include algorithmic bias, threats to student privacy, reduced human interaction, and the erosion of critical thinking. For example, biases in training data can perpetuate inequity when certain groups are misrepresented. Furthermore, the rapid pace of deployment strains the capacity of institutions to reflect on consequences. A recent study found wide variation in educators' awareness of AI ethics, highlighting gaps between institutional norms and personal ethical standards. In sum, the digital age offers tremendous promise, but also risks that education becomes dehumanized, surveillance becomes standard, and learners are shaped by algorithms rather than nurtured through dialogue. 6.5. ET Conceptual Framework: Digital Ethics Within the Spiral of Transformation. Within ET's spiral of transformation, policy-driven agile sustainable culture, digital ethics operates at every phase. In the policy phase, institutions must craft governance frameworks that prioritize fairness, transparency, and human dignity in AI use. The Taiban phase invites ethical innovation, creative uses of AI that enhance meaning rather than replace reflection. The Agile phase demands adaptive processes for monitoring and recalibrating technology use in light of ethical feedback. The Sustainable Culture phase embeds digital ethics into institutional habit, not as compliance, but as character. Thus, the moral compass of AI becomes a living element of the ecosystem, not an add-on, but the moral software that runs beneath the hardware of transformation. 6.6. The Ethical Principles of Digital Intelligence. International bodies such as UNESCO have formulated key ethical principles for AI: proportionality and do no harm, safety and security, privacy and data protection, multi-stakeholder adaptive governance. In educational contexts, these translate into practices such as ensuring equitable access to AI tools, auditing algorithms for bias, safeguarding learner data, maintaining meaningful human oversight, designing for transparency, and cultivating human-centric outcomes. For ETE, the principle of ADAB digital aligns with these. Technology must be used with reverence, for the human, for truth, for community. It insists that innovation must not eclipse identity and that efficiency must never override existential dignity. 6.7. Pedagogical Application: Technology as Amplifier of Meaning. In practice, ET reconceives technology not as a substitute for human teaching, but as an amplifier of meaning. AI becomes a collaborator, not a controller. The design of learning systems emphasizes critical AI literacy. Learners not only use AI, but question it, critique it, and shape it. Teachers are empowered not solely by software, but by ethical frameworks that guide how they integrate AI purposefully. Classrooms include digital reflection zones, where students pause to consider, what does the technology make me become? How do I remain human inside this machine? The evaluation of AI-enabled learning asks, did this tool deepen my insight into humanity, or did it disengage me from it? 6.8. Institutional Implication: Governance, Culture, and Digital ADAB. For educational institutions wanting to embody ET, the integration of AI requires more than infrastructure. It requires ethical governance and culture change. Leadership must ensure that AI deployment furthers human flourishing, not merely operational efficiency. Data governance becomes moral governance. Digital literacy becomes digital ethics. Investment in AI becomes investment in human dignity. Culture then shifts. Policies embed digital ADAB. Staff training includes ethical scenario planning. Student contracts include guidelines for responsible AI use. The institution becomes a sanctuary of meaning, not simply a hub of machines. 6.9. Civilizational Reflection: AI, Human Intelligence, and the Future of Education. At the civilizational scale, the challenge of the AI age is not that machines will replace humans, but that humans may abdicate their chance to reflect. In the absence of a moral compass, artificial intelligence runs the risk of reducing the human subject into data points, echoes, or predictive models. ET, in contrast, foresees a transformative civilization, Tamadan Tagiri, where machines serve deep human aspirations, justice, compassion, creativity. In this vision, the future of education is not digital only, it is humanity-centered. Technology is integrated, but it is guided by spiritual intelligence and ethical intelligence. The university becomes not a factory of algorithms, but a sanctuary of meaning where AI is in service of the human soul. 6.10. Summary Statement: The Moral Compass of the AI Age. In the end, this unit asserts that digital ethics is the moral compass of the AI age. In the ecosystem of transformation, artificial intelligence must be anchored in adab, aligned with the human index, hux, and embedded within the spiral of transformative processes. ET invites us, when we press a button, let us ask, what am I becoming? When we deploy AI, let us ask, whom am I serving? Education must transcend automation and awaken the human. Machines may calculate, humans must contemplate. In the age of intelligence, it is conscience that becomes our greatest technology. Shall we proceed now with Academic Unit Number 7, Institutional Transformation and the Smart Campus, Prof? Excellent continuation, Professor. Now we progress into Academic Unit Number 7, Institutional Transformation and the Smart Campus, a key pillar in the ecosystem transformative education, EE, structure. If Unit 6 placed ADAB digital and AI ethics as the moral compass of the technological age, then Unit 7 shows how those values take institutional form. This is where the transformative ecosystem crystallizes into practice, where universities, schools, and learning communities evolve from bureaucratic structures into living organisms of enlightenment. Blue Book Ecosystem Transformative Education, ED.
Academic Unit Nomor
7. Institutional Transformation and the Smart Campus. 7.1. Conceptual Introduction: The Institution as a Living System. An educational institution is not merely a building of classrooms, servers, and management systems. It is a living organism with its own soul, rhythm, and destiny. Within the ET worldview, transformation begins when an institution stops functioning as a hierarchy of control and starts evolving as a community of consciousness. The idea of the smart campus often emphasizes connectivity, sensors, and automation. Yet in the ET lexicon, smart does not refer only to digital capability, but to spiritual intelligence embedded in system design. A truly smart campus is one that thinks ethically, feels empathetically, acts responsibly, and learns continuously, an organism of light, Nur al-Ilm, and order, Nim al-Hikmah. ET therefore redefines institutional transformation as the process of cultivating spiritual, digital symbiosis, the balance between innovation and introspection, between efficiency and empathy. 7.2. Philosophical Foundation: From Bureaucracy to Ecology. Historically, most educational institutions were constructed upon industrial metaphors: administration as management, classrooms as production lines, students as products. Such bureaucratic logic emphasized control and compliance rather than creativity and conscience. The ET paradigm dismantles this metaphor and replaces it with one of ecology. An institution, like an ecosystem, must breathe, interact, and regenerate. Policy becomes the root, governance the trunk, learning the leaf, and culture the fragrance.
Each part nourishes the other.
Philosophically, this transformation draws from systems thinking, Maqid al-Sharia, the higher objectives of divine law, and the prophetic model of community, Ummah. It sees institutions as collective souls tasked with cultivating balance, tawazun, justice, ADL, and beneficence, izn. The smart campus is not a space of mechanical control, but a moral ecology, a network of meaning. 7.3. The spiritual logic of institutional change. ET argues that institutional reform must begin with intention, niyya. True transformation arises not from new software or facilities, but from the awakening of collective sincerity, ikal jamai. When the leadership sets an intention for renewal, that intention becomes the metaphysical seed that reorders the system. This is followed by Muzaba al-Muassasa, institutional self-reflection. Through structured introspection, universities and schools assess not only their performance indicators, but their moral temperature. Are we nurturing compassion or merely producing compliance? Are digital tools enabling wisdom or merely efficiency? ET teaches that every meeting, decision, and innovation must begin with remembrance, dhikr, and reflection, fikr, so that transformation remains sacred, not superficial. 7.4. The 4 pillars of institutional transformation. Institutional transformation within ET unfolds through 4 interlocking pillars: ethical governance, humanized digitalization, reflective community, and sustainable culture. Ethical governance ensures that leadership is guided by adab and justice. It frames policy as service, not domination, and places moral integrity above managerial ambition. Humanized digitalization means that technology is applied with consciousness. Smart systems are designed to simplify human effort without simplifying human purpose. Automation supports educators rather than replaces them. Reflective community represents the renewal of collegial life. Faculty, students, and staff gather regularly in circles of reflection, halakha al-fikr, to discuss ethical dilemmas, institutional challenges, and creative ideas. This fosters a shared culture of sincerity and innovation. Sustainable culture embeds transformation into institutional habit. When ethical governance and reflective practice persist long enough, they form a stable tradition of excellence, istiqamah. 7.5. Scriptural grounding, institutions as trusts amana.
The Quran remains humanity.
Indeed, we offered the trust to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, and they refused to bear it and feared it, but man undertook to bear it. QS Al-Azab, 33:72. ET interprets this verse not only personally but institutionally. Every university, every school, every educational network is a bearer of that amana. Buildings, budgets, and technologies are secondary. The primary responsibility is the preservation of truth, adab, and hikmah. A smart campus that upholds this trust transforms its operations into worship. Ibadah Muassasiyah managing resources becomes an act of devotion. Maintaining justice in decision-making becomes an expression of servitude. 7.6. The Smart Campus Ecosystem, Structure and Flow. In the ET model, the Smart Campus is envisioned as a living ecosystem composed of 4 dynamic domains. Ethical policy core, the moral constitution that shapes decision-making. Digital infrastructure, the neural network that connects learning processes. Reflective human core, the collective consciousness of educators and learners. Cultural atmosphere, the spiritual climate that sustains harmony. Information technology acts as the circulatory system that carries knowledge and feedback through these domains. Reflection serves as the respiratory system, allowing the institution to breathe ethically. Leadership functions as the heart that pumps sincerity through every policy. The ecosystem thus mirrors the human body described in Hadith. The believers, in their mutual love, mercy, and compassion, are like a single body. When one limb suffers, the whole body responds with fever and restlessness.
HR Muslim.
A smart campus, in this sense, is a body of knowledge and compassion. 7.7. The integration of HUX into institutional design. The Human Index, HUX, previously described as the architecture of 10 intelligences, becomes the diagnostic instrument for institutional balance. Each intelligence corresponds to a domain of campus life. Cognitive intelligence manifests in research culture, emotional intelligence in student relations, moral intelligence in governance, spiritual intelligence in community engagement, technological intelligence in smart systems, ecological intelligence in campus sustainability. Through HUX-based assessment, institutions can identify areas of imbalance, for instance, high digital capability but low reflective culture, and design corrective strategies. Thus, HUX transforms institutional evaluation into a moral mirror, not merely a managerial tool. 7.8. The role of leadership, from control to custodianship. In the ET vision, leadership is a sacred trust, wilaya, not a privilege. The leader of a transformative institution is a custodian of meaning, tasked with harmonizing policy, people, and purpose. Such leadership requires hikmah al-idara, wisdom of administration, where every decision is preceded by consultation, shura, guided by fairness, and infused with prayer. Leaders act not as owners of institutions, but as gardeners of ecosystems, watering virtue, pruning excess, and cultivating future seeds. When leadership is grounded in adab, the institution itself becomes a form of moral education, a living textbook of integrity. 7.9. Civilizational significance, the smart campus as micro-ummah. ET envisions each educational institution as a micro-ummah, a small civilization within civilization. Its campuses are not isolated entities, but luminous nodes in the global network of wisdom. When institutions operate with sincerity, they emit moral light that radiates beyond their physical boundaries, shaping communities, industries, and policies. A smart campus in this sense is not defined by the number of servers or screens, but by the serenity of its spaces, the justice of its systems, and the compassion of its people. It is where technology bows to ethics and where knowledge is offered as mercy. Through the proliferation of such institutions, Tamadun Tagiri, the transformative civilization, gradually materializes. 7.10. Summary statement. The institution as an ecosystem of light. Institutional transformation within ET is the realization of education as a living moral ecology. A smart campus, guided by adab and sustained by digital consciousness, becomes both a symbol and a substance of enlightened civilization. ET proclaims that the future of higher education lies not in automation, but in illumination, not in artificial intelligence alone, but in ethical intelligence woven through every circuit of institutional life. When a campus learns to think ethically, it becomes a lamp. When it lives ethically, it becomes a constellation. Transition to academic unit number 8. Next, we will enter community transformation and the learning society, where ET extends its reach beyond the campus, cultivating villages, cities, and nations as interconnected learning ecosystems guided by faith, reason, and compassion. Would you like me to proceed now with academic unit number 8, Prof, in the same narrative and philosophical depth, focusing on societal ecosystems and community empowerment within the ET model?